Hi, everybody. This is Amy Major with Spirit Rescue Talk. We have another wonderful interview today. We've had some really great ones, but I'm really excited about this one because I think I mentioned it in the post before that I have April Sheein with me today, who happens to be my teacher from what I think 20 years ago and then years after. And she and I have been working together ever since. We bonded so well because she has so much knowledge, so much experience to be able to share. So I'm really, really glad that she decided to come on and share this wonderful experience with me to be able to give you some of her stories so you can learn the same way that I learned. So I just want April to kind of share a little information about herself so you understand how wonderful, awesome she is and why I came to her years ago. So welcome, April. Tell us all
Hi.
about yourself.
I'm still going to look at you. It's hard not to. Anyway, right at this point, I would say I'm still a mentor to you, not a teacher anymore, because I think your area expertise has surpassed mine. So the greatest gift a teacher can ever have is the student succeeds. All right. But my name is April Sheein. I have been working with spirit. I've been working with spirit since I was born, because I grew up in an extremely dysfunctional home, and I had a gentleman that was probably the size of an oak tree that used to walk and talk with me and help me to not lose myself in all the drama that was going on. In the process of that, he used to explain things to me and he'd tell me things about this earth. So it wasn't until I ended up with a double fractured spine. So let me back this up. I have been a house mother for intellectually challenged in a retraining program that succeeded so well. They actually started doing the other houses the same way I did. And I did it purely on a psychic level. I didn't know that's what I was doing at the time, but that's what I was doing. All right. I have been a paralegal, I have been a nurse, and I ended up working with computers, hardware, software. I have a very scientific mind. I believe that everything we do has a logistic reason, that miracles are just knowledge that we don't understand yet. So in the journey of that, I have been exposed to so many things, and blessed in that. So ultimately, I started reading cards when I was in my late teens, early 20s, and I'm 70. So I've got 50 plus years going. All right. In the process of that, spirit has placed me in places where I've been subjected sometimes, and I call that subjected, to a lot of different areas, a lot of different experiences. And so I have a plethora of knowledge. In the process of that, working with what you work with has been something that I've exposed to, I've worked with, but I really prefer to do other things. So thus spirit gave me you to help. Okay. Now, part of what's going on, and again, I'm a science-based person, so I believe that everything we can do follows natural law. In the process of that, I had a client that they thought was schizophrenic because she kept experiencing all these different things. And I stood there and watched her energy and watched what she could do. And she was flipping through dimensional walls and not even knowing that's what she was doing. So any given moment, she could be in another environment completely, and she didn't know she made the transition. So one of the things that are really fascinating about this world is that we are moving into the space that on an energy level that the Bible called limbo. Now, you have to understand that there's a lot of people who were raised with the idea they were going to hell.
Right.
And the truth is, hell was never in the Bible until the King James Version.
Right.
And it was gravitated and used because of Dante's Inferno. So Dante invented hell and the church took it and ran with it. All right. There are anybody who's Catholic, you can check this out. If you're not, check it out. There are 2 popes now that have said there is no such thing as heaven and there's no such thing as hell. You can be in heaven or hell right here. There's no waiting. Now, science has taught us that there are at least 12 dimensions. They don't know what they are, but they can calculate and know that there are at least 12 dimensions.
Mhm.
So that ultimately walking into the world, and when I started working with spirit, going into clearings, I had to learn that I appeared as the ghost in this world, in their world. That I just suddenly appeared out of nowhere and shocked them. And I had to gain their trust. So that part of doing this work is not going in with guns blazing, but going in with ears listening.
Mhm.
Because a lot of times their aggravation is they see us, but they don't know how to contact us and they think we're ignoring them.
Right.
So if you can imagine having years of being ignored and trying to get somebody's attention, how frustrated they get. I've actually done clearings where there were multiple levels, so that ultimately there were people from the Civil War there. There were people from a whole group of Black people that died in this house that were part of the Underground Railroad.
Mhm.
There were at least 6 different levels. There was the French Indian War that was there. There was a woman who died during the Civil War. Her family had bought her a second, put on a second floor, and she laid in the bed upstairs waiting for her husband to come home. While he came home, he was downstairs and didn't know the second floor existed.
Hmm.
So I tell people, when a spirit walks through a wall, that wall doesn't exist in their world.
Right.
It just doesn't exist in their reality. So they just walk right through it.
Mm.
So that it becomes a really interesting dynamic of what you're really dealing with some of these situations.
Absolutely.
But then you've got the ones that, and this is personal opinion, that all these shootings, you've got some that died mentally ill and just wanted and needed to kill people. And ultimately, all of a sudden, they didn't cross, because why would they want to? They didn't know what that was, so they stayed where they were.
Mhm.
But as somebody dies, and I've experienced this too, where they were in a disease state and they didn't cross, they still carry the pain of that disease.
Yes.
If somebody crosses and they're mentally ill, they still have that mental illness.
Mhm.
So that educating yourself on how to deal with some of these things is not going in with guns blazing, thinking you're going to get rid of these evil things. And I know that I do not call them demons or devils, because of the fact that as soon as you do, you gave them power.
Right.
Because deep inside of us, so I call them cosmic cooties. I like calling them cosmic cooties. Because they don't know what to do with that name.
Right. They're like, why? Why?
But devils and demons and evil, that they do.
Right.
All right.
That holds
So
an in-
I always tell people, spell evil backwards, it's live. Spell devil backwards, it's lived. So
Mhm.
the only evil for me is the inability to live one's life, and the only devil is living in the past. So ultimately, going into these things afraid that you're going to meet a demon ultimately takes your energy away. It doesn't put you in power. You got to know that the reason why that spirit bounced off of me. Oh, I didn't talk about that yet, did I?
No, we talked about it before. Why don't you tell us the story?
That's what I said, repeating myself. Lee Carroll wrote a whole series of books from Cryon. Cryon is an entity the size of a house, a big house.
Right.
And one day I was working on teaching at one of my classes, astro projection. Ultimately, this entity showed up, and he called himself, I thought he said crayon. So I went to work the next day, and I said to my friend down at the White Light bookstore, I said, this entity showed up and started talking to me. He called himself Crayon, Creon. She goes, Cryon. She had the whole series of books from him.
Oh,
So I read those books, but that was the only time I experienced him. Well, this woman was claiming she was channeling Cryon. So they asked me to go and witness to see, to verify this is what was happening.
right.
When I went and I sat there watching this dark entity swooped down and went right inside the woman, and she started channeling. And I looked straight at her and I said, "You're a liar." It pulled out of her and came straight at me, straight at me. But the thing is, it bounced off my energy, because dark entities, dark energies don't know what to do with pure hearts. They don't know how to. And that ultimately you got to know, when you go in with a pure heart, it's a power. You have power there. Remember, it takes a little bit of light to light the darkness.
Right.
But if you lived in darkness all your life, a little bit of light is a scary thing for them.
No, a lot of people ask that. They said, well, if I'm full of light, why is there still darkness around me? And
again, you've got to look at your own self as far as that's concerned, because I always say that energy flows through us, and I like to practice I'm going to get that word, I can't, non-resistance, Eastern philosophy, non-resistance, which means if it's got nothing to do, it's not going to hook in, and it's not going to. But you got to know that they're experts at touching into the insecurities we have.
right.
And that's how they sneak in. They can sneak in when you're sitting there and you're wondering if you're good enough, or you're wondering if you're doing it right, or you're wondering, all right, those insecurities are food for them.
Yep.
And that's how they attach into us. That's not a normal thing. So that you've got to clear yourself. And what I do is I always ask that I connect directly to the heart of God, the source of all sources, and let that be the energy that moves me forward. That I can see this world the way God sees it, not the way I in a human form sees it.
Mm.
But it also gave me the ability to see things in dimensional forms. So in essence, sprites and divas and gnomes and fairies, there are times I can go out in the garden, I can see them. And I actually had an experience where I bought my center in Derry when I was there. Nothing grew, nothing grew. And I sat down on the ground and I looked around and I noticed there was no fairies there. There were nothing, no sprites, nothing.
Right.
So I sat on the ground and I invited them to help me clear this land and to help it to grow. And all of a sudden the grass started growing, and I was putting in a rock garden, and as God is my judge, there was, my son would mow the lawn. I'd wake up in the morning and a full-grown flower would be there, full grown. I'd scoop it up and put it into my garden, and the next day there was another full-grown flower in the midst of cut grass. So how do you do that? How does that happen? If you don't have, and for me, cause and effect, it's all cause and effect, which means there are things that I don't understand. The cause and effect tells me that, yes, I really did talk to them, and yes, they are there helping because they're showing me.
Right.
All
Exactly.
right. So that asking for proof, asking for things that let your earth logical mind understand helps as far as that's concerned.
Right.
All right.
I remember all the energy at your place. And I remember once I was standing out on your porch, and I remember these cloaked people walking by the house in astral form. And I took a double take and I'm like, did I just see that right? And you're like, oh, you saw them. I'm like, what did I see? What did I see? So I'm still a student. There's a lot of energy in that area where the house was. I think there's no coincidence that that should have been a metaphysical center.
but the thing is that I work with angels. I work directly with angels. I can see them as real as I can see you. And I'm talking great big tall ones, great big wings. They actually taught me how to create vortexes on that land.
Mm.
They taught me how, and I am not a regimented person. I always say if I have to do the same thing twice, I've done it once too often. So I was never a regimented person, but I had this 3-wick candle, and every single morning I would wake up and I would ask for the spirit of love, the spirit of truth, the spirit of abundance. All right. So I asked for abundance in all things. And one day I just started putting on weight, putting on weight, putting on weight. And I was going crazy because it's not like I was eating more. It's not like my diet changed. Finally, out of frustration, I said to my angels, I said, what's going on here? It's like, no matter what I do, I can't lose this weight. And they laughed and they said, well, you asked for abundance on all levels and all things. What did you want?
Be very specific.
So knowing what you're saying and knowing how they're hearing it
Mm,
is also really important too.
right.
All
Definitely.
right. But having a guide from when you're starting out doing this kind of work, having a guide from the other side is really important. So having somebody that mentors you and keeps you safe until you get to our level where they were expected to know.
Mm,
All
definitely.
right. Because of the fact that ultimately we encounter things and we don't know what they are, and our own fear invites them in.
Very true. Very true.
Okay. So just like mediumship, you need a gatekeeper when you're doing this kind of work. Having a gatekeeper when you start out is really important. But they are going to test you and let you get into trouble to see what you're going to do with it.
There's a lot of mediums
Having,
out there that say they don't need gatekeepers.
well, you know something, if it's like this, you can walk around without underwear and pants, but eventually you're going to freeze yourself because it'll get cold.
True.
Yeah. You know, I always say ability without humility is nothing. And knowing that you have to have the ability to know that there are those on the spirit side that are trained in this stuff, that are, you know, one of the things when you first started getting into this, Amy, is I was really concerned because I knew what that would entail.
Right.
But I looked at your guides and you had some really awesome guides that were working with you. So that alleviated all my stress as far as what you're doing and how they were going to handle, because they were big guns.
Mm.
And I always say, you don't screw with me because I got big guns.
I remember you saying that you're like, I'm really impressed with your guides. And I'm like, you saw them before I saw them. So that kind of made me feel a little better going, okay, maybe they know what they're doing. I can kind of relax a little bit into this because this isn't easy stuff.
But you also know that they play games with you sometimes, all
Right.
right?
Yes.
Because it's not that you're not going to get to what they tell you, but they're going to test you first to see what you're going to do with it.
Right.
All right. And I feel like that you're going to be quite famous, but I also feel like in that process, you had to have these things that let you down and keep you strong and see if you were going to motivate yourself through it.
Right. Resilience was a big lesson in my
All
life.
right. All that's mine comes to me from the universe, not from somebody.
Right.
All right. And that people have to stop looking at this universe as though we're puppets in a world that somehow somebody else has constructed. You know, my belief is that we are direct descendants of God, all of us. But I also believe that centuries of religion and centuries of beliefs have allowed entities not to move on and have allowed them to stay in their own illness. That ultimately the fear of going to hell even good people. I've met people that were so good, and yet their fear of going to hell was so strong, and they thought they had done something that maybe, and so they didn't pass.
Hmm.
I had a woman who died of cancer. Instead of crossing over first, she went to look for her family. And then she got stuck and didn't know where she was and didn't know how to get out of that space.
Now, there's a lot of
So
mediums out there that say that there's no free will in the death process and that they only go straight into the light. What would you say about that?
that's not true. I can tell you, over the years and years and years I've worked with this. And again, you've got to keep an open mind, because you get yourself set in a mindset that this is only true. You're going to find that you're limiting yourself. All right. You're limiting yourself as far as the knowledge. Remember that your destiny is not to have a body. Your destiny is not to. But whether you cross over and whether you don't, that's free will. And they cannot force you to do that. One of my favorite stories, there was a beach up in Nashua, New Hampshire, and everybody was petrified to go down Sella. Everybody was scared to go down there. And if they had to, they'd run down and run back up. And they didn't know why, because it was just a basement.
Mm-hmm.
So I walked down into the basement, and they're having a shootout. It was like Groundhog Day, you know, the movie Groundhog Day.
Mm-hmm.
They're having a shootout. There was a man and two kids on one side, and this goon and his flunky on the other side, and they're all shooting at each other. And of course, all of a sudden, I appear to them, and they're shocked because they don't know where I came from or what I am. So I said to them, you don't have to stay here. Well, as soon as I said that, the flunky, he takes off.
Mm-hmm.
Now I got the goon in front of me, the guy and the two kids on the other side. And I said to him, there is a better place. I said, there's no hell. I said, I guarantee you, you will do a review, but nothing bad's going to happen to you. They're interested in your healing, not in your punishment. And so he said he couldn't leave because he didn't get last rites.
Right. That a lot.
So I call into the spirit world and ask for somebody who's capable of giving last rites. Well, instead of getting a priest like I expected, I get a Franciscan monk. And this guy standing there in the brown robes and the thing around his waist, the whole outfit. And this guy starts arguing with him because he doesn't believe he can give him last rites. Finally, the monk convinces him, he gives him last rites and takes him. And that's a really true part of cause and effect, is that when you have something that happens and you don't expect it, ultimately that becomes a major part of that.
Yes.
All right. So anyway, now I'm dealing with the guy and the two kids, and the guy is looking at me like they're not going anywhere. I own them.
Hostage situation.
I said, oh yeah. And I said to the boys, I want you to think of your mother. I said, your mother's been looking for you. They're desperately trying to find you. Now just think of them. Next thing I know, two women show up. They grab the boys by the ears and take off with them. Now they've got the guy standing there all by himself. And what had happened is he and the kids were bootlegging, and the mom came in to kill him because he wouldn't stop.
Oh.
All right. So the goon was sent down there to kill the kids and him, and ultimately they all ended up dying.
Right. Wow.
All right. Because there was a half wall between them, which was really interesting. So anyway, I said, you can spend eternity here, but you're going to be all by yourself. I said, there's a much better place for you to be. I promise you. I said, I want you to really, in your heart, think of somebody you miss terribly. And he was gone. and everything was quiet.
Now, I know that you said that a few times, and I've taught this to my students a lot. When you say think of someone you know and they show up, why does that happen? Why would you ask them to think of someone?
Because the spirit world is telepathic. It's just like you call somebody up on the telephone, they have a choice to pick up or not.
Right.
But there's a movie out there called Made in Heaven with Timothy Hutton, if you really want to see how the spirit world works. Because all you have to do is start thinking of a single person. And the irony is, you know a John, how many Johns are on the other side, but you have a cord connected to the person you know.
Right.
And this is something that, you know, there are people out there that cut cords. The reason is because, positive or negative, you have a cord connected to the people that you know and you still hold anger, fear, resentment, or love to.
Right.
You have cords to those people.
Now, are there any cords that you can't cut?
I've actually met some people with steel cords. That means lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, they've encountered each other and the cord kept getting stronger, not weakened, and it wasn't a good cord.
I've seen that. And those cords look gold to me for some reason. Like I've seen.
Well, again, one of their greatest lessons,
Mhm.
you would represent in your mind the gold.
Oh,
So that there are some people that are soulmates. Now, soulmates are actually a heart condition. It's not a cord condition.
right.
All right. In the process of that you need to know that my angels taught me that there were originally 12 tribes, but there were 12 groups within every tribe. So there was 144 tribes in this world. All right. That you are a part of a monad. Now, a monad means that you were divided into 12 pieces. And each of your pieces goes out and has a different lifetime and then brings the knowledge back to the whole. Now, if you're growing faster than some of the others, they will actually leave the life they're in and be called home to support you in your growth, because that will grow the group the greatest and the most.
Right.
So the dimensional realities of what really goes on, and knowing that, talking to spirit as long as I have, every single one of them, when they first get there, call that home, their home.
Right.
So that if that's home, what are we doing here?
On vacation?
I don't think so.
No.
We're learning lessons. We're learning how to be the drop of water in the middle of the ocean. We're learning that being a grain of sand, that our grain is just as important, and the strength of that grain is just as important as the rest.
Right.
But when you're in the spirit world and you're connected to them and they're connected to you, because that's the way it is there. All right. That it's almost like a hive where everybody is on the same channel. So where do you start and where do you end? Because you don't have a body to stop anybody from interfering.
Right.
All right. And if you can be manipulated here, you certainly can be manipulated there.
Yep. You don't change.
You don't. So that the lessons we learn, you know, as hard as we think some of them are, know that we have two guides assigned us at birth, an angel assigned us at birth. Now, the angels told me the reason why they don't let us know that they're there is the fact that ultimately people start asking them to pick out their toilet paper.
Yes.
Meaning they don't want to make a decision themselves because they want permission from their angel to do it.
Right. Tell me what to do.
When they're here to support your life, they're not here to direct your life. And that's why when you get into trouble, the right people step in and try to help you. That's where humility comes in. You know, as much as I know, I've met people that have so much knowledge that ultimately I feel like I've got a grain of it.
Right.
But at the same time, I do feel like I'm in junior high or high school in this world, and some people are still in grammar school.
Well, yeah.
You don't go to somebody in grammar school and say, I know algebra, I know quantum physics, I know, it's like they'll be impressed, but that's my ego talking.
Right.
When I'm supposed to be there to help them gain knowledge.
Right.
That's the best way I find to explain that, is that they are not here to promote themselves, they are here to promote you. And as long as you remember, it's a symbiotic relationship. You're not their servant and they aren't yours.
Now,
But
I do have a question. You had spoken a little bit about soulmates, which I absolutely believe in, but there's a term that's been around the New Age community for some time called twin flame. What do you feel about that?
well, it's a fascinating element because of the fact that somebody who's a soulmate is your exact match, which means they're one of your 12. You are have 11 other souls that carry, and I guarantee you can finish each other's sentences. You can be 100 miles away and you're going to feel each other. It's literally like having your soul twin. But the difference is there are soul groups, so that if somebody's part of your 12, so you have 12 in your soul, then you have a soul group that has 12. In those aspects, they align this way, they don't align this way. Then you can have people from your soul extension, which are people that you meet from day to day. You pass somebody and all of a sudden you just look into their face because you're attracted to them. Most likely they're part of your soul group. You may not have anything to do with their life and they may not have anything to do yours, but you're recognizing that aspect of that.
Very much so.
Does that answer that?
Well, I know a lot of people talk about the whole twin flame being the other half of who you are. And I know what my guides have said about it, but how do you feel about another soul? Because the way that they've described it is your higher self splits into two souls and becomes your other half.
There's a really cool book out there called Little Buddha. I recommend you read it. There's actually a movie. You can watch the movie if you don't want to read. But it's all about the monks in Tibet. All right. So this gentleman who was really high ranking in their society, they were looking for the next Buddha, or the next guy, not Buddha, but the next guy that will be his. No, I don't remember. I've watched it so long ago. But the point is, what they found is they go into the your star chart, and they can, based on that star chart, see where you're most likely going to reincarnate. But they found 3 children who all, because they go into a room and they have to see if they recognize their own things.
Right.
All 3 of these children passed the test. And what it turned out is he decided to divide himself into 3 cells so he could learn more information and see it from a different perspective.
Right.
Well, believe it or not, there are a lot of old souls here that are doing very young things because they separated themselves into multiple souls in order to learn more in this world.
Now, does one soul affect the other soul in any way?
It's really interesting because I think the recognition of meeting that soul as soon as you do, it's like you just know each other. It will be a feeling of, I just know them.
Right.
The problem I encounter is they think that means it's going to be a perfect match. They're still human in a human world. They're still in the process of growing and learning too. So ultimately, it depends on where their lesson is and where your lesson is.
Yeah.
When I talk about twin flames, I actually had the experience where I was in a club in Boston and I was there for my nephew's birthday. I was supposed to go to work, but it was raining so hard. I knew that we wouldn't have any clients and ultimately that I'd be so wet there would be no point of going. So I stayed. I came off the dance floor and it was like a B movie. I mean, I swear, like a B movie. This light came out from the ceiling, encompassed this man, and everything else in the room disappeared. He was all I could see. In a split second, I knew he had to come to me. I could not go to him. So I just turned tail and walked upstairs where the party was going on and just totally ignored him. In the process of that, we came downstairs after the party and my sister wanted to go to this other bar. And we had to go under the staircase to get to that bar. By the time we got there, he was standing there like he'd been there all night. We were together for 4 years, but every time I needed him to be there for me, he shut down, shut off, and closed up. And my soul knew that I could be with him as long as I was willing to live life his way, but that would not serve my soul.
Right.
And as I believe that we incarnate all the time, that I believe there'll be another space and another time for that, but he hadn't grown as much as he should have to be with me.
Right.
And it was one of the hardest lessons I had to learn is to walk away, because I had to walk away unconditionally. I mean, I didn't not love him. I loved him with all my heart. But the truth is that I could not live with the conditions I would have had to under him.
I have heard a lot of people that have built attachments to other people, obsessions with other people, and that can make them feel like they can't move on without them. And that can actually go from lifetime to lifetime and lifetime through karmic cycles of that same attachment.
Do you ever think that maybe their real lesson is unconditional love?
That is the lesson that they're not learning. But
right.
Not for the other person, but for themselves.
Right. Well, that's what I had to learn that lesson for me. I wasn't learning it for him. I was learning that for me.
Right.
And I know to this day, if I ever went to him and I said, he would have been there. But the truth is that I had to move on and learn other things and continue to grow myself. And I just knew that.
Wow. It was a hard decision, but one that I think you made the right decision. Otherwise, you wouldn't be who you are today.
But it also brought me to a place where I can look at people in all their dysfunction and still know that they deserve to be loved.
Right.
One of my great lessons, and I know it's not about a rescue, but I was reading for this woman and this man showed up and I know when they play hide and seek, they show up and every time I give them attention, they take off and they come back and they come back and they come back. So finally, I left my body and went to him, astral projected to where he was. I said, I know you want to talk to her, so tell me what's the problem. And he said to me, she hates me. He said, she deserves to hate me. He said, I was a loathsome creature when I was in the earth plane. He said, but I want to show you something. And he took me to this place where there was a garden. It was the most beautiful garden I'd ever seen in my life. And there were flowers there that I'd never seen and colors I'd never seen, and everything, even the color, felt alive. And as we were walking and talking, he said, when I first got here, they sent me here, he says, and I was so hurt and I was so ashamed of myself. He said, it hurt to be here. He said, but they kept sending me back until finally I realized, despite everything I'd done, I was still loved. And as he said those words, this light came in, and it wasn't a light, it was viscous, meaning it had texture and had energy, and it saturated right into me. Just absorbed into me. And in that second, I felt like I was in the presence, the direct presence of the God mind. It, beyond all the things I've ever experienced, that was the most amazing experience.
Wow.
He said to me, if you could tell her if she could be just a little less angry, he says, I'll take her here and give her the gift that was given to me.
Mm.
But I tell people all the time, anger, fear, and resentment are soul killers. That takes your bank away from you, your soul bank. So that ultimately you got to know that you pay a higher price for those than the person who gave them to you. But those are also your soul lessons. Anger, fear, and resentment doesn't do any good. It's not going to fix anything. It's not going to make anything better. And the truth is that you pass that pain on to other people because you're going to deny you carrying it.
Right.
And as much as I'm saying that doesn't pertain to, it absolutely pertains to the work that you do. Because knowing your own soul and knowing what's yours and knowing what's not is going to keep spirits from coming in and trying to take over.
Right.
I was at the Hooten Mansion, and Mr. Hooten actually climbed right into me and tried to take over.
Mm.
And I had an internal fight to get him out of my body. I mean, I literally had to call the angelic force to remove him from me because he wasn't going anywhere.
Right.
But it made me realize he was looking for somebody to walk around in a body with because he was stuck in that house.
Yep.
So that, again, you got to know that their interaction with us for over a period of time, they gain knowledge too. They look for ways that they can escape from the situation they're in, because there's a limit to where they can go to their own memory.
Mm. Right. And we're seeing them more often than we ever have before.
And that I always say, because the Bible says that there is a limbo. For all those that are skeptical, they have to know that Jesus removed demons from people, and that in the Bible, it says on many occasions that there is a place called limbo or purgatory, depending on which Bible you're reading. Some call it purgatory, some call it limbo. But that means they're not in this world, but they're not in that world either.
Right.
Energetically, we are moving back into that space. Now, if you talk about this logically, in 1900, if you were 40, you'd be considered an old person.
Right.
People were marrying at 12 and 14 years old because you wouldn't have a chance to raise your family if you didn't.
Mm.
So that ultimately, think about 1900 to 2000, how quickly we started to expand.
Right.
That ultimately, that they set the retirement age at 65 because they thought most people would be dead by then and they get to collect the money.
Right.
But what happened is people said, I'm supposed to retire at 65. I'll take 5-10 years to play and then I'll go.
Wow.
Mind over matter. This is the thought patterns that people give. The same way as I say, science teaches us there's no reason why we should get old, but we see elders in our family and we think that's what we're going to look like.
Right. Fear.
All right. And ultimately, fear is a soul killer. It actually deteriorates. You know, the people that died from COVID, a lot of those people died from fear of it more than the disease itself. Our bodies are designed to take care of itself now.
Right.
But also understand that on a molecular structure, and understand, I love quantum physics, but they're teaching me quantum fractal science right at this point. Spirit world is teaching me fractal science. All right. So that I can converse with any engineer, any scientist, and the two of us can have a good conversation because I understand what the hell they're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a world within a world within a world within a world. And that's how the dimensions work.
Right.
If your reality says this can't exist, in your world, it won't.
Right.
Leaving yourself open and having a gatekeeper when you start will prevent you from getting stuck in a world.
People are jumping. They're moving around different dimensions, different realities.
And they don't know, they don't operate on the same rules as they do here.
Right. They don't.
But the one rule, and this is what I'm going to give you, one rule that exists in all levels, all dimensions, nobody's allowed to interfere with your free will.
Correct.
Nobody is allowed to interfere with your free will.
Right. In this universe.
I had an incident when I was teaching healing, and I've taken probably a dozen modalities, worked with shaman. I've worked with South American shaman, many American shaman. I've worked actually with the Tibetan monks, and I've done Reiki. When I took Reiki, I didn't go and take the class. I went to Mr. Usui and asked him what he thought of this.
Right.
And boy, that was an interesting conversation.
I'm sure it was.
He called it the magic dunk. You sit in class for a couple hours and dunk, you're one, dunk, you're a two, dunk, you're a three. Well, you're a master.
Wow.
So,
I'm sure it will perfect over time, as long as
that's again what you believe and what you put time into. But also remember that the more you put time into something, the more on the spirit side, people are attracted to you to help.
Right. Very much so. And the world needs a lot of help right now, a lot of healing right now.
But they have to get past fear. It's like if you're afraid you're not going to have enough, you're not going to.
Right.
Whatever you put and this is what I always say, what I fear, I draw near.
Yes.
What I hate, I'll create. What I believe, I'll achieve.
Wow. Remember that.
And it's not about being a Pollyanna and thinking that if I think really good thoughts and I'm really good and I'm really nice and I don't upset anybody, that ultimately that good things happen. That's not the way it works, because I told you before, assholes are assholes because they shit. There's no rhyme, no reason. The only thing an asshole knows how to do is shit. But people need to remember, if we didn't have them in this world, we'd all be spiritually constipated. It's that simple.
You gotta love her sayings. You really do.
I like to keep it real low and down to earth,
I love it.
And again, it's because I believe that anything we do doesn't require you to be holier than thou. The Bible says to bring heaven to earth, not earth to heaven. So that it's learning how structurally the greater universe works and bring that energy here. Being a conduit of their energy into this world to create a better world. But if you think an asshole is going to do anything but shit in your space, the trick is at that point, are they shitting on your shoe or are you shitting on your head? Because if they're shitting on your head, you bent over. Assholes are not designed that high.
Gotta love it.
Laws of nature. That's a law of nature.
Right.
And I believe in natural law.
Well, it all comes back to self. All your
It
development
also comes back to whether you need the fertilizer or not.
Well, again, you've taught so many things. I mean, and these are things that I've learned from you through all the years, and it's been extremely valuable in my work. I know my work's deviated a little from yours, become more specialized. As you would say, you're more the general practitioner. You do everything, whereas my guides pointed me in a singular direction when it comes to spirit rescue. So I'm grateful.
And again, you've got some heavy hitters with you.
Yeah.
But you don't get those until they think you're ready to deal with their level.
Right.
And I know they watched you for a while to see if you're capable. And that's even with me. Over the years, I've had guides that have come in and they watch to see if we're compatible. And that's where I said, the higher I go, the less ego there is. It doesn't mean they don't have a good sense of self. There's a big difference between having ego and a good sense of oneself.
Very true.
But we're here to learn boundaries, and boundaries in a lot of different areas. And people like you and the ones that have chosen to do your work ultimately are servicing the fact that we are moving into their space and they're seeing us.
Yep.
And now we're seeing them.
And rescue mediumship is growing. My guides have told me it's going to grow exponentially 10
But
times.
again, remember how many spaces, we're talking planet wise. We're not talking, oh, they all gather here because no, they're everywhere.
Everywhere.
They're everywhere.
Right. And we have to have the right heart, the right mind, the right soul to be able to do this job. And I'm very grateful for everything that you taught me.
And the greatest protection you have is to draw it right into your heart and let them be co-creators with you.
Amazing.
So many things you don't need a gatekeeper. Don't call them gatekeepers. Call them your guides. Call them whatever you want. They're not offended.
And not all they're human too. You have to remember that. They are whatever they need you to be. You need them to be.
And remember that a lot of these dark entities are dark entities because they were experts at confusing and taking over other people's minds.
Right.
I wouldn't enter that situation without help.
Right.
I don't have a gun on my body, but I want to bring a big gun with me when I deal with that.
Very much so. Definitely requires
All right.
work.
But I could go on forever. I have so many stories and things that
I'm
I've
sure we could talk
experienced
for
that
hours,
it's like,
but I know we can't. So why don't you tell people how they can get a hold of you if they really want to be able to learn from you like I did?
all they have to do is Google April Sheerin, Sheerin, and they'll find me on the web. You know, I have a website, aprilsheerin.com or newawakenings.com. Both of those are active. So, you know, again, I've done so many, and that's where I'm blessed. You know, it's like, it's not that I went out looking to do these things. It's not like I went out looking to teach at a college, or I went looking to be on TV. It just came and it was there. And I said, well, what the hell, what's the worst thing that could happen?
Great way to think about it.
But when I taught at UMass Dartmouth, it was a stone building with stadium seating. A feather about that big came out of the ceiling, started to float down. I put my hand in the air and I said, my angel's here. She wants to say hi. It floated down in front of 60 people. Every one of them saw it, went just below my waist and disappeared.
Wow.
Spirit will show and prove things if you let them.
Yes.
So I'm not leader of the band, but I am not the guy in the rear either.
Well, I think the world is really appreciated everything that you've done. And I know you have a lot more that you're going to be doing. There's still always more work to be done. There's always more to learn, always more to teach. So I'm so grateful to have you here. And
I am so happy for you in the journey that you're taking, because like I said, I know the tests they put you through. I know the things that they did, but people have to listen because of the fact that knowing that that's what they did to you, you can help other people.
And that's my mission.
And again, that's to break your ego, not to destroy you.
No, I completely understand. Ego gone. They did
well, you know, I always say Western philosophy tries to kill tries to feed the ego. Eastern philosophy tries to kill the ego. And there's a balance point between those two places.
Right.
You have to have a healthy ego, but not an arrogance.
Yes, exactly. Self-assured.
But I also, before we close, I just want to say, this is something I was taught, is you put your hands over your heart whenever you need something, really need something. And what you do is Jesus, and I'm not talking about Jesus, the Savior, we're talking Jesus, the man. He always put his hands out this way in a receiving position. And I go, what's mine comes to me from the universe, not from somebody. If you're going to do this work, you have to believe that there's a greater universe. You have to believe there's a greater purpose. It would be no purpose for you to do this work otherwise.
Right.
But also know that the Bible says, what father would give their child a stone when they ask for bread? How much more will your Father in heaven give you? Ask and you shall receive. It may not come in the form that you expect. So let go of expectation and watch how it comes.
Well, wonderful words to end by. Thank you so much, April, for being here.
Thank you, girl.
I'm so
Love
grateful
you.
for you. And thank you everyone for joining us today. And I'm grateful to have you all here. There will be other episodes coming up, lots of great interviews. But please reach out to April if you feel that you really need a little extra assistance you're looking to develop, as I did many years ago. All the gray hair showing the years now. So I just want to thank you all for being here, and I wish you all the best. See you next time.
Take care. Bye-bye, darling.